Krypton was burning. Above the glistening spires of Kandor, the skies boiled crimson. The planet's core, long since poisoned by unchecked energy exploitation, had become a ticking time bomb. Cracks split continents, gravity lurched, whole oceans evaporated into the black. In the High Council chamber, panic reigned. Scientists were screaming. Lawgivers fled. Even the mightiest minds of Krypton could no longer deny the truth. The world was ending. Among the chaos, two figures moved with quiet purpose. Jor-El and Lara, cloaked in shimmering robes, their eyes wet but resolute. In the heart of their home, a sleek capsule hummed with ancient technology. Glyphs flickered across its surface. Within, nestled in a crystalline cradle, slept a child. Their child. Kal-El. "He won't remember us," Lara whispered. Jor-El placed a hand over hers. "He will remember hope. That's all that matters." The sky above them split open. The final quake tore through the foundations of their home. A storm of flame rose like a titan from the horizon. Jor-El touched a final sequence. The pod's engines ignited, and the last sun of Krypton was flung into the stars, a streak of silver and fire, as Krypton shattered behind him in silence. The void swallowed time. For nearly 30 millennia, the pod drifted, silent, forgotten, locked in temporal stasis. The newborn within did not age, did not wake, untouched by the warp storms that tore at the galaxy. The vessel passed ancient battlefields, dying suns, dead civilizations, but never once slowing, until it came upon a blue world, orbited by ringed cathedrals and crowned with endless storms. Terra. And it did not simply arrive, it crashed. The impact rocked the Imperial palace itself. A beam of white light tore through the atmosphere and struck the obsidian courtyard outside the Hall of Leng, one of the most sacred, secure points of the inner sanctum. Statues of fallen heroes crumbled, gold and marble shattered. Servitors and scribes were vaporized in an instant. The alarm klaxon screamed. 100 custodies descended in moments, storm shields raised, halberds glowing with lethal intent. Magos cryptographers shrieked about Xenos infiltration. A defensive perimeter was established. Guns were trained on the still smoking crater. And at its heart, half buried in molten stone, was a blackened alien pod. Unknown alloy. No warp signature. No power readings either. Just silent. Until it hummed. The custodies moved to destroy it. "Hold!" The voice cut across the courtyard like a blade of light. The Emperor of mankind had arrived. He did not simply walk, he radiated. A being of such impossible gravity that the very world seemed to realign around him. Golden armor like a walking sun. Eyes like twin singularities. Even the custodies bowed low at his presence. He looked upon the pod and saw through it. His mind, honed beyond comprehension, pierced its alien shell. Reading energy signatures so alien they felt more like laws of nature than technology. And within it, a child. He was not human, nor was he psychic, not warp-born either. But the power inside him was real, tangible, something ancient and alien, yet pure in a way the warp could never mimic. The pod's alloy resisted all other scans, yet it sang with solar energy. The child was untouched by chaos, uncorrupted by the warp, and yet stronger than any creature the Emperor had ever encountered. He raised one gauntleted hand. The pod opened with a chime, unfolding like a blooming flower. And there he was, a child, no more than an infant, wrapped in pale blue linen, his skin smooth as porcelain, jet black hair already thick. His eyes opened, and for the briefest second, they glowed red. Every custodes flinched. The Emperor only smiled. The Emperor named him Kal-El, keeping the alien name written in the crystalline matrix of his pod. His origins were locked in secrecy, erased from any record, known only to a handful of his most trusted scribes. Kal was raised within the hidden chambers of the palace, far from public view, not with warmth, but not with cruelty either. The Emperor did not coddle, he forged. Kal's childhood was one of relentless learning, mathematics, galactic history, combat arts, logic, philosophy, Terran dialects and languages long lost, the sciences of the Mechanicum, the forbidden principles of the warp and the flesh. But always, Kal was taught control. By the age of 6, he was lifting stone slabs larger than tanks. By 10, he could run faster than a custodes on grav boosts. But he could not fly, not yet. His full powers remained dormant, fed only by the weak sunlight of Terra. Still, the custodes feared him, and the Emperor watched and waited. Kal was 17 when it happened. He stood in the Hall of Iron with nothing but cloth trousers and a training staff. Across from him towered Custodes Aethon Varax, clad in partial armour, a halberd held loosely in one hand. Kal rolled his shoulders. Athon's face was unreadable. "Are you ready, son of Terra?" Kal didn't like the nickname, but he nodded. The first blow came like a thunderclap. Kal blocked it. Barely, his staff splintering under the weight. He moved fast, ducking, spinning, kicking low. Aethon grunted as Kal landed a blow to his thigh that would have shattered a tank's suspension. But it wasn't enough. The Custodes retaliated with a sweep that sent Kal flying into a column. He gasped, tasting blood. Pain was new. He liked it. Kal stood. Something inside him cracked open. He charged. No hesitation. No fear. He dodged the halberd and slammed a punch into Aethon's side. The golden warrior staggered. Staggered. Kal's fists blurred as he struck again and again, until Aethon caught him by the throat and threw him into the wall. Kal hit hard. Dust fell. The world swam. He tasted fury. His fists clenched. And then, his eyes burned. Twin beams of searing red exploded from his face. The heat vision roared across the chamber, striking Aethon square in the chest. The Custodes flew backward like a missile, crashing through 2 pillars and collapsing in a smoking heap. His armor was melted, his chestplate black. Silence. Kal stood panting, his vision blurry, blood dripping from his nose. "What was that?" he whispered, terrified. Then, applause. Slow, heavy, metallic. The Emperor stood at the edge of the arena. "You have awakened, Kal-El." Kal turned, still shaking. "I didn't mean to." The Emperor raised a hand. "No, you needed to. This is who you are." Kal looked down at his hands. They were shaking. "I hurt him." "Yes, and soon you will do much more than just hurt, my son. You will reshape worlds." Later, as apothecaries tended to Aethon, who would live and wear the melted armor with pride, Kal sat alone in the starlit gallery beneath the throne. The Emperor entered silently. "You fear your power," he said. Kal didn't answer. The Emperor knelt beside him, not as a god, but as a father. "You are not like other beings, Kal. Not even the Primarchs. You are something new. A creature not of warp or gene law, but of pure potential. I have seen the strands of fate, and you stand outside them." Kal finally looked up. "Why me?" The Emperor did not smile often, but now he did. A silent chamber, the stars spinning above Terra, the golden light of the throne flickering through stained glass. Kal-El stood alone, his cloak newly forged, bearing no heraldry. Yet his fists were clenched, his eyes glowed faintly red, and the galaxy shuddered, for a new force had awoken on holy Terra. Not a Primarch, not a demon, but a god from another world. A son, a weapon, a hope. Vortan's Reach had once been a thriving forge world, its surface scabbed with manufactoria and machine cathedrals, pumping out munitions and armor for the Imperial war machine. Now, it was a war zone. An orc horde had crash-landed in the outer provinces only weeks before. In true greenskin fashion, they bred like spores in the mud, dug up looted weapons, and bellowed their way toward the heart of the world with overwhelming numbers and violence. Imperial Guard regiments stationed there were already on their last legs. Vox signals were desperate, clipped with fear. Images came in. Mobs of green-skinned monsters smashing through steel bulwarks, tearing apart tanks with axes and claws, using the limbs of their victims as crude flags. By the time reinforcements arrived, it was already too late. Or so they thought. Kal-El stood in the loading bay of the troopship Vigilance Ascendant, helmet in hand, a fresh silver-blue suit moulded over his form. His cape, a deep crimson, hung from his shoulders like a war banner. His black hair was windswept, his eyes unreadable. He was 20 now. A custodian stood beside him, silent. A hologram displayed a burning continent. "The orcs are dug in," came the voice of the Lord General. "Our guard units are outnumbered 10-1. They've lost all artillery, no air cover. You'll deploy directly to the forward trench line and take command. Further reinforcements are weeks away. They won't survive without us." Kal-El nodded once. "I'll make sure that they do." He stepped into the drop pod alone. No escort, no thunder run, no orbital bombardment. Just a single pod screaming toward a world on fire. Guardsmen of the 74th Vostran Infantry huddled in shattered trenches beneath a sky thick with ash and spores. Their lasguns were melting. Their officers were dead. Mud soaked their boots. Orc roars thundered beyond the ridgeline, so loud they shook their teeth loose. A grizzled sergeant peeked above the parapet and cursed. A tide of green was charging, bellowing, shooting wildly. "Fix bayonets," he roared, his voice breaking. The guardsmen prepared to die. And then the sky cracked. A sonic boom split the clouds as something struck the earth like a thunderbolt just behind the trench line. Dust and flame mushroomed skyward. Everything stopped. Even the orcs slowed down. The pod hissed. Steam vented. The hatch fell open, and a figure walked out. The guardsmen stared in shock as Kal-El stepped forward, eyes glowing faintly, cape trailing in the wind. He was not like them. He didn't wear their armor. He didn't wear flak plates. Nor did he wield a bolter. Not even a helmet. Just a symbol none had seen before. An ancient glyph on his chest, like a winding S curled into a diamond. The orcs laughed. A massive orc screamed. "You what? Kill that pretty boy," and charged. Kal-El moved. He vanished in a blur and reappeared in front of the warrior. His punch landed like a thunderclap. The orc's body erupted in a spray of green mist. Its torso caved in like wet paper. Silence. Then another orc charged, and another, and another. Kal didn't hesitate. His fists became hammers, crushing green flesh and bone. One orc's axe shattered against his skin. He grabbed another by the skull and hurled it out of the atmosphere. He ripped a looted gun in half with one hand and used it to club 3 more into dust. Guardsmen stared, dumbfounded. Then Kal stopped. He stood in a circle of corpses. His chest rose and fell. The remaining orcs regrouped on the far ridge. Hundreds of them. And they grinned. "Big fight, boys. He's strong," they roared. "Get him." Kal braced himself as the ground trembled. A wave of orcs, more than 500 strong, was charging. He'd never faced this many enemies before. He'd never needed to fly before. He looked up. The sky. A memory stirred in him. The heat of Krypton's dying sun. The warmth that powered him. The sun above him was weak, but it was enough. He focused. The roar of war faded. His feet left the ground. He rose, slowly, then faster, faster still, until he hovered 20 feet above the trench, his cape flaring in the wind, eyes glowing like stars. And then, with a deafening crack, Kal-El launched himself into the horde. He became a blur of red and blue. Fists shattered bone. Lasers of heat vision cut through the mob. He flew straight through trucks, reducing them to metal confetti. He grabbed 2 orcs mid-charge and smashed them together like cymbals. He flipped, spun, and corkscrewed through the battlefield, turning slaughter into art. To the orcs, he was a god of war, and they loved it. The guardsmen, shaken from their awe, surged forward, inspired by the impossible. For the Emperor, they screamed, joining the fight. Kal tore through the orc lines, carving a path through mobs. An orc warboss, 3 times the size of a man, with armor grafted into his skin, stepped forward with a power claw the size of a tank's door. "Use a good fight," it growled, "but I'm better." Kal landed before it. They clashed. The warboss struck first, its claw slamming into Kal's chest, sending him flying through a wrecked tank. He stood wincing, but far from broken. Kal charged back, dodging the next strike, grabbing the claw mid-swing and ripping it from the warboss's arm. He punched just once, upward. The warboss's head snapped back at a brutal angle, and the greenskin collapsed like a felled tree. The remaining orcs hesitated. Kal looked at them, his chest heaving. Blood and green gore streaked his face. He opened his arms. "Come on then." The orcs howled and charged. It was glorious. It took hours, but the tide broke. When the last orc fell, silence returned. Kal stood in a crater, surrounded by bodies. The battlefield a ruin of twisted metal and steaming flesh. Guardsmen emerged, their weapons lowered, blinking in disbelief. Then one dropped his lasgun. Another followed. A cheer broke out. "Superman! Superman! Superman!" The chant echoed over the scorched plains. Kal-El looked up, stunned. He had never heard that name aloud before. Ash choked the wind as Medicai's servitors picked through the carnage, collecting the wounded and tagging the dead. Broken trucks smouldered in the distance, their crude engines forever silenced. The sky had turned a burnt orange, Vortan's reach bleeding light from broken atmosphere. Kal-El stood at the edge of the battlefield, motionless atop a shattered Prometheum drum. His cape, once a regal crimson, now covered in green gore. His arms were slick with their blood. Chunks of orc tissue clung to the ridges of his armor. He stared down at his hands. They trembled. He flexed them slowly, as if trying to convince himself they still belonged to him. These hands saved lives, he reminded himself, but all he could see was what they had destroyed. He remembered the warboss's face when his fist shattered his skull. The way the orcs screamed in joy as he ripped through them like a blade through parchment. The way his own rage had overtaken him, not out of necessity, but instinct. The Emperor's words echoed in his mind like a cathedral bell. Victory is its own virtue. Mercy is for the weak. Mankind must endure. He had followed that creed. He had won. But this wasn't what he imagined being a protector would feel like. A roar echoed across the field. Guardsmen surrounded a wrecked chimera still chanted, "Superman, Superman, Superman." They raised their rifles, clanged their helmets, and shouted in exhausted joy. He looked back at them, eyes distant. He managed a small nod. A smile ghosted across his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. Inside, something twisted. Is this what it takes? Is this what I must become to protect them? His boots hit the ground with a heavy thud as he stepped away from the corpses. He walked past a bloodied guardsman, kneeling over a friend's body. The man looked up at Kal-El in awe. "You're not human, are you?" the guardsman whispered. "You're one of his angels." Kal didn't answer. He kept walking. Toward the transport lines where a golden figure waited. A towering custodes stood there, sentinel still, clad in gleaming armor. His halberd was grounded at his feet. He watched Kal-El approach and gave a single respectful nod. "You fought well," the custodes said, his voice like a furnace behind a mask of calm. Kal paused. His face was unreadable for a moment. But then, with an effort, he put on the expression expected of him. A brave face. Strong, composed, unshaken. "Thank you," Kal said softly. "For the Emperor." But his fists still trembled. The custodes turned and began walking toward the dropship. Kal-El followed, eyes fixed on the setting sun as the wind pulled at his tattered cape. Behind him, the battlefield was silent, save for the echoes of a name born in war. Terra, just a few years before the siege of Horus. The solar glare filtered through the uppermost spires of the Imperial palace, casting golden light over a garden of obsidian statues and weathered relics. Birds that had not gone extinct in the age of strife circled above the colonnades. Beneath a withered tree grown from ancient Terran soil, Kal-El stood in silence. He had just returned from Vortan's reach. He had been hailed a hero, yet he felt hollow. He heard footsteps before he saw the golden light. The Emperor emerged from the archway like a sun in the flesh, his golden armor radiant, his eyes pulsing with power. "You carry the weight of victory poorly," the Emperor said as he approached. Kal turned, his voice low. "I killed them all. With my hands." The men cheered, but they didn't see what I saw. "They were orcs," the Emperor said calmly. "They are a mindless, destructive species. They live only to kill. There is no reasoning with them, no peace to be made. Xenos, especially orcs, must be exterminated for the good of humanity." Kal's expression darkened. He looked down at his blood-stained hands. "I see. So, I am not human. Do I fall under that same decree?" The words hit like a hammer, sharp and raw. The Emperor's gaze softened. For once, there was no sermon, no fire. "You are not like them," he said. "You are something far greater. Not alien, but an evolution, a perfection, a brother to mankind, as I am." Kal looked up, unsure. "You are more than just a weapon, Kal-El. You will be Earth's greatest champion in the wars to come." There was silence. Then Kal nodded slowly, not fully comforted, but steadied for now. The Emperor placed a hand on his shoulder. "But you still have much to learn. You need to see war through the eyes of your brothers. Within days of his audience with the Emperor, Kal-El boarded the war cruiser Ignis Noctis, bound for the Gerus Expanse, a region racked by instability and civil disobedience. The 18th Legion, the Salamanders, had been deployed to crush rebellion and bring the worlds of the sector into full Imperial compliance. The atmosphere aboard the cruiser was somber but resolute. Astartes moved with disciplined calm, their green armor dulled by ash and battle wear. Kal walked among them silently, absorbing the energy of soldiers forged in fire and duty. Their destination was Dracos Prime, a world where volcanoes belched fire into an ashen sky and cities were carved into obsidian cliffs. It was a human world, one that had chosen defiance over obedience. The rebellion was not chaos-tainted, not Xenos-backed. These were men and women who had simply refused the Emperor's dominion. Kal stepped from the lander into a choking haze of soot and wind. The sky was bruised red, and the ground trembled with each distant eruption. And then Vulcan descended. His ship broke the clouds like a burning hammer, his descent turning night into flickering daylight. When the ramp lowered, the Primarch strode out, a colossus wreathed in heat shimmer. His obsidian black skin reflected the firelight, and his crimson eyes glowed with something rare among demigods: empathy. "Kal-El," he said, voice deep as a tectonic rumble, and held out his arm. Kal met his grip, forearm to forearm, and nodded. "It's an honor." Vulcan smiled. "Let us see what honor looks like in battle." And together they descended into the crucible of rebellion. They marched through shattered manufactorums and bombed out cathedrals. They met rebel commanders face to face and gave them a chance to surrender. Some did. Others spat in defiance. Where Vulcan walked, order followed. Where Kal walked, awe followed. The civilians whispered of the Black Titan and the Skyborn God. But peace is fleeting in the Imperium. At first, Kal was inspired. Vulcan showed compassion in ways no one else had. He paused to bury enemy dead, to speak with wounded non-combatants, and to personally see that children were evacuated before bombardments. Kal saw him kneel beside a girl crushed beneath rubble, lifting the stones gently, not as a warlord, but as a father might. "I have no joy in death," Vulcan said, standing beneath a statue that had lost its head in shellfire. "But duty does not care for joy." Kal nodded, but he did not yet understand. Then came the city of Etherion, a spire world turned fortress, where rebel snipers perched like crows and tanks rolled down blood-slicked boulevards. The Salamanders lost 3 brothers to a booby-trapped cathedral. Rage simmered in their ranks. Vulcan responded with calculated wrath. He ordered airstrikes, flamers, and methodical purges. He gave the rebels another chance to surrender. They refused. Kal joined the assault. He was a blur of red and gold among fire and smoke, tearing through barricades, disarming tanks with a twist of his hands, shielding guardsmen with his body. His heat vision burned through bunkers. His fists broke machine guns like toys. But then he saw her. A mother, running with her child, no weapon in hand. A bolt round caught her in the back. She collapsed forward. Kal blurred into motion, catching the child before it struck the ground. He turned. His cape was singed, his face streaked with grime and rage. A squad of Astartes stood in formation nearby, their bolters still smoking. "Why?" he demanded. One of them answered, matter-of-factly. "It is the Emperor's will. Compliance must be total. All who resist are enemies of mankind." The child sobbed in his arms. Kal flew, straight to the command tent, trailing sparks and fury. Vulkan stood over a hollow map, reviewing tactical feeds. He turned as Kal landed with a quake. "They were unarmed," Kal said, holding up the child. "She was just trying to protect her child." Vulkan looked at the child and gestured gently. A Medekai servitor came forward and took the boy. "She ran in the wrong direction," the Primarch said quietly. "We warned them, again and again. They chose to die." Kal shook his head. "They were humans. We're supposed to protect them." Vulkan's voice was calm, but heavy. "And we do. But you cannot protect those who refuse peace. Every day we delay, more of our people die. We do what we must." Kal's fists trembled. "Peace shouldn't be built on ash and corpses." "Then show me another way," Vulkan said, "and I'll follow it." Kal stepped forward, eyes burning like twin suns. The very walls of the command tent quivered. "I won't be a butcher," he growled, "even for the Imperium." Vulkan remained still. "Then don't be. But do not mistake sorrow for weakness. I've killed more men than you've seen stars, and I still dream of their faces." Kal's aura flared, raw power humming in the air. For a moment, war trembled on the edge of brotherhood. They stood there, Primarch and Superman, like gods on the brink. Vulkan did not move. He stood in the command tent, the tactical holomap flickering between city sectors and unit deployments. His eyes were fixed on Kal-El. The energy in the air crackled, Superman's fury radiating like a rising star. But the Primarch did not flinch. Instead, his voice was low, firm. "The galaxy is not fair, Kal-El. It is not merciful. It does not give second chances." Kal's fists trembled. "I know what I saw, and I know what you haven't," Vulkan replied, stepping forward. "You are young, you are powerful, but you haven't seen the madness of the Eye of Terra, the silence of a Xenos swarm after a world is destroyed. You haven't watched a city of 10 billion burn in the span of a breath because their leaders faltered." Kal's expression hardened, but the burning glow in his eyes dimmed slightly. "We act not out of cruelty, but necessity," Vulkan continued. "The Emperor's vision is the only path that doesn't end in extinction. Without unity, humanity is ash waiting for the wind." There was silence between them, just the soft hum of generators and the distant echo of gunfire. Kal-El exhaled slowly. "I don't like it," he admitted, "but I'll trust you." "No," Vulkan said. Trust him. The Emperor sees farther than any of us. Before Kal could respond, the Vox unit behind them crackled to life. Warning. Void signatures detected in system. Craft world unknown. Veiled Phantom class. Hostile intent confirmed. Surface strike imminent. The air sirens screamed across Dracus Prime. Civilians ran for shelter beneath the blackened sky as fire lanced down from orbit. Eldar ships, sleek, crescent-shaped, moving like living flame, sliced through the upper atmosphere. Pulses of blue light slammed into Promethean plants, refugee camps, and Arbiters barracks. Whole blocks vanished in flashes of plasma. Kal was already gone. He soared upward, through ash, through stratosphere, until he broke the clouds with a thunderclap. The sky lit up with contrails and shipfire. Above him, the void was alive with war. A dozen Eldari warships danced between orbital platforms and the Salamanders' fleet. Their vessels moved like ghosts, phased, graceful, impossible to lock onto. But they had never faced a being like him. Kal reached the first ship in seconds. He slammed into its hull like a meteor, tearing through wraithbone plating with his bare fists. The ship's shields flared, trying to repel him, but he burned through them, heat vision carving glowing scars through the craft's spine. The ship burst apart in a ripple of fire and shrieking psychic backlash. Two more turned toward him, unleashing barrages of crystalline fire. Kal spiraled, dodging between the beams, then shot forward and punched through the bridge of the second ship. Eldar crew were flung like dolls in 0G as explosions followed in his wake. The third ship tried to flee, but Kal simply overtook it, ripped open its engines, and hurled its burning core into the void. From the lead craft world cruiser, a chorus of psychic screams echoed across the warp. The Eldari commanders saw what they thought was a weapon of the old knight, a living god. And they retreated. In a matter of minutes, the remaining ships phased into the webway, vanishing like smoke on the wind. Dracos Prime fell silent. Kal-El hovered above it all, smoke trailing from his body, his eyes dim, his chest heaving. Below him, a burning city mourned its dead, but it still lived. When Kal landed again, the Salamanders gathered in reverent silence. Vulkan stood waiting at the edge of the landing zone, his armor scorched from the attack, but his posture was as strong as ever. "You saved tens of thousands," Vulkan said. Kal looked down, silent. Vulkan stepped closer. "This is what awaits us, Kal. Without warriors like you, without the Emperor's guardians, humanity dies screaming in the dark. That's what we fight for. Not glory, not vengeance. Survival." Kal glanced toward the still smoking cityscape, where Medicae servitors tended to the wounded, and guard troopers sifted through rubble for survivors. He nodded once. "I think I'm starting to understand." Vulkan clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Good. Then you're ready." Terra, the cradle of mankind, the heart of the Imperium. The day of the ceremony arrived beneath a sky of purest gold, where the clouds parted not by weather, but by the will of the Emperor himself. Bells tolled from the spires of the ecclesiarchal cathedrals. Vast throngs gathered on the outer terraces of the Imperial palace, lining every level and buttress, their cheers echoing like thunder up the sacred mountain. Within the Hall of Triumph, all was silence. Kal-El stood alone in the centre of the great chamber, beneath the gaze of history. Vaulted ceilings arched hundreds of meters above, adorned with frescoes depicting ancient victories, the Unification Wars, the First Crusade, the Scouring of Ulinar. Statues of the 20 Primarchs loomed from their alcoves, colossal, ageless, cold-eyed. Some stood proud, others contemplative. 2 niches were empty. The air was thick with reverence and expectation. The golden dial at the far end of the hall pulsed with psychic power. There, upon the golden throne, the Emperor of mankind sat in radiant stillness, his presence so vast it crushed thought. Around him stood a circle of custodies in ceremonial formation, their halberds lowered in salute. Kal's armour had been cleaned, polished to a mirror sheen. The House of Fabricator General had reforged his crimson cape, its gold trim lined with micro-sermons and coded blessings. Yet beneath it all, Kal still felt the heat of Dracos Prime, the weight of ashes, of screams, of decisions made in fire. He knelt as the custodies approached. A towering warrior bearing a platinum laurel set with black stone and electrum, forged in the core of Sol itself. The Emperor's voice was like thunder, muted by distance, both soothing and absolute. Kal-El, son of Terra, defender of the Imperium, you stood where mortals broke. You rose where legions fell, and in defiance of the void, you held the sky. Kal's head bowed lower. You have served not for triumph, but for the survival of mankind. Not with pride, but with sacrifice. And for that, I name you champion of the Imperium. The laurel was placed on his brow. A beam of golden light fell from the ceiling, refracting through the reef like a prism. Kal's figure was wreathed in radiance, a silhouette of a man, and yet more than just a man. He was a legend in the making. The chamber erupted into applause, thunderous, ceaseless. Primarchs stood in salute. Guilliman, Vulcan, Ferrus, Rogel, even Magnus the Red, watching with his ever-glowing eye, offered a subtle nod of approval. Kal rose slowly, uncertainly, scanning the faces of these demigods who were somehow his brothers. Vulcan stood nearest, his arms crossed, a smile not just of pride, but of trust. Their bond, forged in battle, held. But further down the line stood Horus Lupercal, the Warmaster. Clad in silver-trimmed plate, the eye of Terra on his gorget, he clapped with deliberate grace. Slow, controlled, a smile on his lips, but not in his eyes. He leaned slightly toward Fulgrim, who stood beside him in regal splendor, his armor polished like glass. Curious, Horus said under his breath, loud enough only for the Primarch ears. The Emperor crowns a Xenos with honors meant for his sons. Fulgrim's violet eyes flicked toward him, bemused. He fought with the fire of a Primarch. Perhaps that's what he is. There are only 20, Horus muttered. No more, no less. Are you certain? Fulgrim replied, almost sing-song. He's not even human. Fulgrim's smile faded slightly. And neither are we, brother. But Horus wasn't smiling anymore. His hand flexed at his side, knuckles pale. He stared at Kal-El, haloed in golden light. The Emperor's chosen, as the cheers of the Imperium shook the very stones of Terra. And for the first time since his ascension to Warmaster, Horus felt something ancient and dangerous claw at his chest. Not hatred, not fear, but jealousy. A worm in the apple, a shadow in the flame. And far above them, high in the darkened reaches of the throne chamber, the Watchers of the Warp looked on and began to whisper. It began long before Davin, before the plague-choked skies, before the moon turned black with rot and war. It began on the world of Zenobia, jewel of the Interrex. When the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet arrived, led by the Warmaster Horus himself, it was not with bolters, but banners. For once the Imperium had sought peace, dialogue, a bridge between two human empires, and it nearly succeeded. But in the Hall of Devices, where ancient Xenos artifacts were kept sealed and quarantined, something was stolen. A weapon, locked behind runes and stasis fields, the Anatheme. A blade from another age, slender, black as sin, impossibly sharp, forged by the Kinnebrak, a Xenos species that had danced too close to the warp. The Anatheme did not merely kill, it rewrote destiny. It struck soul as well as flesh. And the thief, Erebus, first chaplain of the Word-Bearers, servant of darker gods, smiling, always smiling. Time passed, the fleet moved on, but Erebus's plan, years in the making, neared its crescendo. On the feral world of Davin, the former Imperial planetary governor, Eugen Temba, had fallen to darkness, corrupted by Nurgle the Plague God, his once loyal troops now gibbering cultists, his body a bloated parody of command. Temba had once sworn fealty to Horus. Now he served rot and ruin. The Warmaster took the betrayal personally. He led the assault himself, with a spearhead force of the Sons of Horus descending upon Davin's moon, where Temba's corrupted forces held an ancient temple, soaked in warp stink and pestilence. Through storm and mud, trench and tomb, Horus carved a path to the heart of the infection, and there in the black temple vaults, Eugen Temba waited. He was no longer human, twisted, towering, crowned with pustulant boils and reeking of decay, and in his hand, the Anatheme. They clashed. Steel screamed against flesh and faith. Horus's axe, world-breaker, shattered bone and scale. But the Anatheme did not care for brute strength. It needed only one cut, and it struck. The blade slid through the gaps in the Warmaster's warplate and kissed his side. The wound was shallow, barely more than a scratch, but it festered instantly, not just in body, but in soul. Horus roared, cleaving timber in half with a blow that would split stone before he collapsed. His sons gathered him up, panic in their vox, despair in their hearts. They rushed him back to the fleet. The apothecaries of the 16th Legion did everything. Every gene salve, every bionic, every stasis field. None could halt the spread of the corruption. The wound blackened. Horus's vitals began to fail. His spirit began to drift. He was dying. And then Erebus stepped forward. With a voice like honeyed rot, he whispered to the Lodge, the secret warrior cult that operated within the ranks of the Sons of Horus. He told them of a place, a sanctuary, a shrine older than Davin's soil itself, the Temple of the Serpent Lodge. A sect of spiritual healers, he claimed, a place of ancient truths. No Imperial medici could save Horus, but perhaps the old ways could. Desperate, they agreed. Horus, barely alive, was taken to the temple on Davin's moon, where black fires burned and words of sorcery replaced medicine. The rite began, and Horus's soul descended into a dreamscape, into visions crafted by gods, into whispers that tore at everything he believed. Horus Lupercal drifted in shadow. His body lay on Davin, bound in corrupted ritual, but his soul was far from the flesh. He floated through a void of oil-black mist and distant screams. Stars flared like wounds, moons cracked and bled. And ahead, golden light. He reached toward it, instinct pulling him forward, toward the throne, toward him. But the light flared, blazed, and became fire. He fell, tumbling through nothing, down through time that was not time, across futures not yet lived. And then he landed on a world split in two. Oceans boiled beneath a shattered sky. Cities, once of Imperial design, lay in smoking ruins. And in the center of the devastation, he saw Kal-El. The Kryptonian floated above a scorched battlefield, his cape shredded, his armor cracked, blood streaming from his knuckles. And at his feet, the Primarchs, dead. Guilliman's throat was crushed inwards, his polished breastplate was shattered. Vulcan lay burned and broken, his obsidian skin fractured like glass. Dawn was torn in half, still gripping his chainsword in defiant rigor mortis. Kal's eyes blazed red, and behind him stood the Emperor's throne, empty. "You see it now, Lupercal," came the voice. Soft, smooth, too many mouths in one. From the darkness stepped four shadows, immense, terrible, shifting. They did not need names. Horus knew what they were. Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, Slaanesh. The ruinous powers. But they wore masks of reason. Their voices almost honest. "He was never yours to trust," whispered Tzeentch, its body a storm of eyes and logic. "Kal-El, the alien sun-child, not a son of Terra, not flesh of your blood. And yet the Emperor raised him above you, Above all of you, Slaanesh purred, coiling around Horus's perception. Look how he took your glory. One victory, and they call him champion. The Emperor did not even flinch as his sons died, came Nurgle's voice, thick and sweet with rot. You are weapons, nothing more. Khorne merely snarled. He should be destroyed, not crowned. Horus watched the scene again. Kal-El, rising into the air, Dawn's head in one hand, Fulgrim's burning blade in the other. Astartes, tens of thousands of them, lay slaughtered around him. Dreadnoughts were melted, titans split apart like carcasses. I don't believe this, Horus muttered. Kal would never. He swore loyalty. Tzeentch laughed, bitter and infinite. There was another vision, a chamber of gold, the throne room on Terra. Kal-El stood before the Emperor, his cape still stained with Primarch blood. The Emperor rose, not in anger, but in approval. Well done, he said. The galaxy is clean once more. You said they were your sons, Horus roared into the dream, but the Emperor could not hear him. Or worse, he did not care. They were flawed, the Emperor continued. Too passionate, too divided. They were never meant to last. Kal knelt. I serve only you, my lord. And one day you shall inherit it all, said the Emperor, touching Kal's shoulder. The throne, mankind, eternity. Horus watched, frozen in horror. He saw his father cast aside everything they had bled for, everything they had become. The legions, the brotherhood, the dream, all discarded for a god of alien flesh and alien sons. You are never more than tools, the voices whispered, and tools are discarded when the building is done. Horus trembled. Lies, he muttered, but the gods closed in. Is it? Hissed Slaanesh. You are Warmaster, first among equals. But he never intends for you to rule, only to clear the way. For Kal-El, said Tzeentch, the perfect heir, the true successor. Khorne growled. Will you die silent while he takes what should be yours? A final vision, the future of futures, the last war. Kal-El stood atop the ruins of Luna, surrounded by lightning and falling voidcraft. His eyes glowed like twin suns. Only 3 Primarchs remained. Leman Russ, howling and bloodied. Magnus, his form half spirit, half sorcery. And Horus himself, older, scarred, his armor dull from battle. They stood side by side. You've gone too far, Kal, Horus said in the dream. This isn't justice, this is slaughter. Kal looked at him and said nothing, then moved, faster than thought. Russ's head flew from his shoulders. Magnus screamed as heat vision carved through his heart, and Horus fell, ribs broken, lungs crushed. Kal stood over him. I didn't want this, he said coldly, but you couldn't let go. Then he plunged his hand into Horus's chest. As the dream ended, Horus felt himself die. Alone, forgotten, betrayed. And in that death, something new awoke. He gasped, back on Davin. His body still burned, but it lived. Around him, Erebus chanted quietly, and the serpents of the lodge coiled around burning braziers. "You saw it, didn't you?" Erebus said, stepping forward. "What he will become." Horus's eyes darted left, then right. He looked at his hands, at the wound on his side, at the stars beyond the open canopy of the temple. "I saw Kal-El, the Emperor, what they will do." "And you felt the truth," Erebus said, kneeling beside him. "They call him champion, but he was never meant to be a brother, just a replacement." "No," Horus muttered, but there was no strength in the word. Erebus leaned in. "The Emperor lies. He lies to all of you. To you, most of all." "And what would you have me do?" Horus said bitterly. "Bow to the ruinous powers? Throw away all we have built?" "Not throw it away," Erebus whispered. "Save it." He gestured to the darkness. "To destroy Kal before he becomes what you saw. To forge a new future. One where the sons of the Emperor shape the galaxy. Not serve as cannon fodder for it." Horus closed his eyes. The dream clung to him. The screams, the betrayal, Kal's hands red with his brother's blood. And above it all, the Emperor's voice. "You have served your purpose." The halls of the Vengeful Spirit pulsed with machine light, lined with black marble and baroque steel. Astartes of the lunar wolves moved with silent discipline, their white and grey armour reflecting the tactical brilliance of countless past conquests. But something in their stride, something imperceptible to most, had changed. A tightness, a subtle stiffness, as if discipline had given way to calculation. In the command sanctum, Horus Lupercal stood alone. The Warmaster gazed through the massive stasis glass viewport, where stars swam in cold silence. His hands were clasped behind his back, but his shoulders were tense, his jaw set. He should have been at peace. The wound from Davin was healed, outwardly at least. The flesh had nipped back, the armour was reforged, yet the dreams remained. Visions. In every shadowed corridor of sleep, he saw Kal-El, wreathed in light, yet drenched in gore. The champion of the Imperium, standing triumphant, not over Xenos, not over traitors, but over the broken bodies of his own brothers. The Primarchs scattered and slain, Vulcan crushed, Guilliman vaporized, Lorgar impaled, and he himself, Horus, disarmed and dying, forced to watch as Kal-El ascended above them. And in the center of it all stood the Emperor, unmoved, unblinking, uncaring. The whispers that followed were a choir now, soft yet persistent. He is not born a man. He will replace you. You are nothing but his prototype to be discarded. Strike first, while you still command the galaxy. A chime stirred him. The grand doors parted. Kal-El entered, his crimson cape sweeping behind him, his armour still bearing the scars of the Garan Reach campaign, scorched by plasma. "You summoned me," Kal said, his tone respectful, but alert. "I did," Horus answered, turning slowly. "We have a situation. Corvalan Secundus, Xenos raiders near the Helios Vault. I want you to lead the strike." Kal raised an eyebrow. "Corvalan is barely strategic. This is a mission for a strike cruiser, not one man." Horus smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "You are not just a man, Kal. Only you can get this done quickly and right." There was a pause. Kal nodded and turned, but his gaze lingered for a moment too long. Something in Horus's posture, in the strange glint behind his amber eyes. He's testing me, Kal thought, watching my limits. And as he left the chamber, he felt, not for the first time, a sense of being weighed and measured, and perhaps feared. Corvalan Secundus was a tectonically unstable world, pocked with deep ravines and plasma faults. The Xenos there were minor, a fragmented species of crystalline predators barely capable of low-orbit craft. Kal descended with a full company of lunar wolves, expecting swift eradication. But what he received was obstruction. Their drop pod assault began as planned, Kal striking like lightning, punching through the upper spires of a ruined bastion and carving a path toward the Xenos dens. Yet time and again, he found himself alone. Squads that should have flanked with him fell back at the last moment. Plasma cannons fired late, giving the enemy time to regroup. Bolter lines broke, forcing Kal to shield entire formations with his own body. At first, he assumed miscommunication, but it happened again and again, until it was undeniable. In one moment, as crystalline warbeasts surged through a breach, a lunar wolf sergeant held his fire until Kal leapt into the gap, shouldering the tide alone, his heat vision cutting through the enemy, fists pounding stone and bone. It was only once the threat was broken did the Astartes advance, offering no comment. Kal stood amongst the wreckage, breathing hard, his cape in tatters. "They're testing me," he thought, "or they're avoiding risk. Either way, they want to see what happens when I'm pushed." When the mission was done, successfully and ahead of schedule, Kal requested an emergency return to the fleet, citing strategic debrief. On the Vengeful Spirit, he wandered the data vaults and Vox channels. Something else was wrong. Chatter among the lunar wolves was sparse and overly encrypted. Sectors of the fleet were operating without clear command designations, and some of the War Council meetings he once attended were suddenly behind closed doors, with Erebus present far more often than before. He reported it to no one, not yet. Instead, he sought one voice he knew he could trust. The Ignis Noctis hung in orbit like a wound in the stars. Kal found Vulkan atop the fortress ship's highest viewing platform, standing bareheaded in the cold of the void, watching a solar flare dance across a gas giant far below. "You felt it too," Kal said. Vulkan didn't look at him. "Horus," Kal nodded. "He's changing. Since Davin, or maybe something changed him." Vulkan's brow furrowed. "There is a shadow in him. Not fear, not doubt, ambition, but it's poisoned somehow." Kal told him of Corvalan, of the pulled punches, the delayed orders. Vulcan's jaw tightened. He's measuring you, trying to find a weakness. You're not just another weapon to him. You're a threat. Kal said nothing for a while. The others, they don't see it, do they? Some do, some don't. But suspicion of the Warmaster is a dangerous thing to speak aloud. Kal looked down at his fists. He's looking for a reason, for a moment. If I falter even once, then don't, Vulcan said simply. Kal met his gaze. And if he falls completely? Vulcan turned back to the stars. Then may the Emperor give you strength enough to stand when the sky breaks. The chamber aboard the Vengeful Spirit was sealed. No Vox transmission in or out. No serfs, no lieutenants. Only Horus, the cold flicker of lumens, and the silence of orbit. He stood alone within the Strategium Sanctum, hollowed into the heart of the flagship. Giant hololiths hovered before him, suspended in magnetic fields. The battle on Corvalent Secundus played back from a dozen angles. Orbital scans, body cam footage from lunar walls, atmospheric overlays, all focused on one figure, Kal-El. Frame by frame, Horus watched as the Kryptonian tore through the Xenos lines, precision and brutality in harmony. The beasts leapt at him, only to be shattered mid-air. Debris collapsed, only to be held aloft with a glance. One lunar wolf was impaled by a crystalline shard. Kal caught the soldier mid-air, cauterized the wound with his heat vision, and threw him to safety before obliterating the enemy formation in a single burst. Horus narrowed his eyes. He zoomed in, enhanced. No armor actuators triggering strength bursts. No energy pack flares. No biotic enhancers. No psychometric pulses. Just raw, natural power. A single thought echoed in his mind, again and again. He is not one of us. He dragged the timeline back, activating archival feeds from the past decades. Garin Reach. Kal flew across a battlefield faster than a thunderhawk. The Vurax insurrection. Kal held up a collapsing hive city. Each year, each campaign. Stronger, faster, more durable. Horus's eyes darkened. He opened another file. Spectrographic analysis taken by a Mechanicum probe after the Battle of Helix Magna. Solar readings, fluctuations. He scanned the battle records. Planets with bright young stars. Kal was unstoppable. On older red dwarf systems, his performance was marginally weaker, still formidable, but the power output, flight speed, heat vision intensity, kinetic force, it was measurably lower. He draws strength from the stars themselves, Horus whispered. He called up Kryptonian physiology scans, radiation absorption, molecular photocharging, subdermal solar energy retention. Kal was a walking starforge. Horus leaned back slowly, shadows creeping over his features. And he is only becoming stronger. Every battle, he adapts, learns, grows. The Warmaster's hands curled into fists behind his back. If Kal-El was allowed to live, what would he be in another 100 years? Not a warrior, not a champion, a god. An alien god. A god the Emperor already favors. The vision from Davin returned to him. unbidden. Kal-El standing on a mountain of his dead brothers, the Emperor silent, watching, allowing it. A tremor ran through Horus's jaw. He opened another projection. Tactical modelling, simulations, scenarios. Kal versus 5 Primarchs. A near guaranteed probability of Kal surviving. Kal versus Horus alone. Negligible success without environmental advantage. Kal in a system with limited solar radiation, reduced power levels. Vulnerability window. But still, too difficult. He would need more. More than just tactics, more than special weapons. He would need power. Horus stood in the gloom, his jaw tight, his breath shallow. A single sentence whispered itself in his mind, whether from himself or from the warp, he did not know. Strike now, or be erased from history forever. On the command deck of the Vengeful Spirit, Horus Lupercal stood draped in shadow, the light of distant stars gleaming against the glass of the grand viewport. His hands were clasped behind his back, but his mind was ablaze. Before him, the hololith shimmered, grainy footage replaying Kal-El's most recent campaign on the irradiated world of Kuranos III. The Kryptonians' movements were inhuman, precise. Dozens of enemies fell in the blink of an eye. Ships were torn asunder by his bare hands. He was an army by himself. "He has no weaknesses," Horus muttered. But that wasn't true. The Warmaster's fingers danced across the console, bringing up energy readings from dozens of past engagements. He narrowed his eyes. A pattern was emerging. Kal was always stronger near class G or F stars, and weaker, slightly, near dwarf systems. On Cathoria Minor, a red dwarf world, Kal had taken twice as long to clear the battlefield. "Solar-based metabolism," Horus whispered. "He draws his strength from the sunlight. The stronger the sun, the stronger he is." A new thought bloomed. Kal-El was not yet at his peak. Each battle pushed him further, stronger, faster, more experienced. Given enough years, even the Emperor himself might not be able to match him. Unless he was eliminated. Now. Horus turned away from the stars and descended into the blackened catacombs of the ship. Beyond steel, beyond light, to the forbidden shrine he had built in secret, a pit of rot and corruption, the air thick with the fetid stench of chaos. The voices were waiting. "You see it now," whispered the chorus of the Chaos Gods. "He will outshine you. He will take the Emperor's gaze from you." "He does not even mean to," Horus growled. "He serves blindly, but that makes him worse." "Then become what he cannot," said the voice of the serpent. "Become the storm that topples the god." Horus stepped forward, into the pit, his armor crackling with raw warp energy. "I accept." The darkness surged. The message burned through the void like a beacon of desperation. Priority Alpha. Lunar wolves detached on Dolman system under heavy Xenos assault. Solar activity disrupting astropathic communique. Need reinforcements immediately. Kal-El requested by name. Kal-El stood aboard the orbital platform above Syraxis 9, watching the message loop again and again. His eyes narrowed as he pulled up stellar cartography. The Dolman system flickered into view. Remote, uncharted, located far beyond navigational lines. Its sun, an ancient red giant, hemorrhaging light in slow, failing pulses. A sick weight formed in his stomach. A red star, he whispered, his fingers flexed, absorbing the implication. It's weak. Less fuel. A place of weakness. He stared at the message again. Requested by name. By Horus himself. Every instinct screamed caution. The Emperor had not summoned him. Vulcan had warned him to watch. The visions haunted his sleep. Visions of Horus with eyes of fire. And yet, he is still my brother. Kal turned toward the void. Moments later, the forge world behind him shrank into silence as he accelerated through the void. The Dolman system swallowed him like a crypt. There was no welcoming beacon, no vox chatter, no defense grid. Just the dying red light of the star, bathing everything in sluggish hues of rust and blood. Kal could feel it already. Not pain, but suppression. A weight behind his eyes, a dull pressure in his bones. Every kilometre closer to the sun stole a little more of his strength. Still, he pressed forward, trailing heat like a meteor across the system. The third planet loomed ahead, Dolman 3, a black rock veiled in crimson dust storms and psychic static that scratched at the edges of his mind like claws on glass. Kal descended through the atmosphere like a spear of red and blue, landing atop a ridgeline scorched clean by ancient fire. And there, on the plateau ahead, stood the lunar wolves, hundreds of them, lined in perfect formation. Too perfect. No movement, no combat stances, their bolters held limp at their sides. Their helmets angled slightly off-center, like mannequins in full warplate. The winds howled around them, but they didn't react. Kal's boots touched down, kicking up ash. He scanned the line, his heart beating a little faster now. "Where's the enemy?" he asked aloud. No answer came, only stillness. Then, like a shadow peeling away from the stone, there was a voice. "Welcome, brother." Kal turned sharply. Horus stood at the far edge of the plateau, just beyond the shattered remains of an ancient alien shrine, its glyphs long since defiled. He wore his warplate, but it was no longer the silvered majesty of the lunar wolves. Now, it was burnished black, threaded with bronze veins that pulsed with inner light, sickly green and raw violet. His once proud visage was twisted, gaunt, and seared with marks that shimmered like branding. And his eyes burned with warp flame. Kal stepped back, his cape snapping in the red wind. "Horus," he said, his voice quiet. "What have you done?" Horus spread his arms. The warp pulsed through him like a second heart. "I've embraced the truth," he said. "I've seen the end of us, the ruin that awaits. You, standing over the corpses of my brothers, the Emperor watching, smiling, as the old makes way for the new. Kal's fists clenched. Lies. Visions, Horus snarled, shown to me by those who dared to speak when the Emperor stayed silent. He gestured to the lunar wolves behind Kal. Their helms slowly turned in unison, mechanical, disjointed, radiating a sour, flickering psychic aura. You lured me here, Kal said coldly. You fed me a lie. A test, Horus admitted. One final chance to see if you could be controlled, if you were still useful. Kal's eyes ignited with ruby fire. You wanted to see if I'd weaken in a system like this. And you did, Horus replied softly. I could feel it the moment you entered orbit. You're slower, dimmer, mortal, almost. Kal's voice cracked like thunder. This isn't you. No, Horus said, stepping forward. This is me without chains. Kal looked around again. The twisted shrine, the corrupted walls, the silence of the wind. So you're planning to kill me? Kal said. Yes, Horus answered. Before you grow stronger, before the Emperor anoints you in truth and discards the rest of us. You were our Warmaster. I still am, and I lead us to survival. Kal stepped forward. You're leading them to ruin, and you would lead them to slavery. Horus raised his hand. The lunar wolves moved. Their steps echoed unnaturally. Their movement staggered, as though guided by strings. Their eyes glowed faintly. Their bodies twisted subtly under their armor, as if something else lurked beneath the flesh. Warp puppets. Kal took a step back, his fists trembling. Please, Horus, you can stop this. It's too late, Horus whispered. Kal's body tensed. You know I don't want to fight you, he said. I know, Horus said. That's why I'll win. Kal's eyes burned crimson. Then you leave me no choice. The earth cracked as the two launched at one another. Primarch, Kryptonian, brother against brother. The sky split in two as they collided. The ridge exploded in a cyclone of dust and warp-tainted lightning as Horus and Kal-El collided. For a heartbeat, they were a blur of titanic force. Kal's fist smashed into Horus's chestplate with the power of a supernova, sending cracks spiderwebbing across the Warmaster's corrupted armor. But Horus responded with a brutal upward slash of his talon. The demon-forged claws raking across Kal's torso with a screech of metal on flesh. Kal staggered, then launched into the air, sending a sonic shockwave across the plateau. He came down like a meteor, his fists glowing with hate, his eyes blazing. Horus caught him. The Primarch twisted, hurling Kal over his shoulder and into the stone ridge, shattering it into a crater. Debris rained down like thunder. Kal rocketed out of the dust, his heat vision spearing forward. Horus crossed his arms, the crimson beam scorching against his tainted armor. You're still holding back, Horus spat, stepping through the beam. I can feel it. Kal grimaced. He could feel it too. The red star was draining him, slowly but inevitably. He dove forward, unleashing a flurry of punches, faster than most eyes could track. Horus was driven back, his armor denting, blood spilling from a cracked lip. But then Horus smiled and struck back. A hammer blow from his talon slammed into Kal's face, sending the Kryptonian skidding across the stone. Kal bounced once, twice, then took flight again, his chest heaving. The ground split beneath Horus's boots as he leapt into the air, catching Kal mid-flight with a shoulder charge. They spiraled downward, crashing through rock and dust and the bones of ancient alien dead. Kal gasped. The pain wasn't just physical, it was growing. The draining light, the warp energy. His strength was bleeding out of him like water through a broken dam. He tried to retreat. He turned skyward, his cape flaring. But Horus was getting faster now. The Warmaster's claw snapped out, catching Kal by the cape, and slammed him into the ground. Again, and again, and again. The battlefield trembled beneath the titanic clash. Every strike shook the ground. The mountains in the distance fractured, avalanches cascading like dying breaths. Ash poured from the crimson sky as lightning spidered through the clouds, some natural, some warp-born. Kal reeled, blood painting the dust behind him. His fists, once engines of righteous fury, now hung heavy at his sides. The dull red light of the dying sun overhead bled his strength with every passing second. He stumbled. Horus came forward, slow and deliberate. "You're weakening," he said, his voice thick with contempt, and yet a hint of sadness. "You should never have come here." Kal's boots dragged through dust and shattered obsidian. "I came because you're my brother," he whispered. Horus's expression twisted into something cruel. "No, Kal. I was never your brother. You are my replacement." Kal's jaw tightened. He surged forward on shaky legs, swinging with a haymaker that could shatter mountains. But Horus caught it and twisted. There was a sound like screaming steel. Kal cried out as his arms snapped, spun backward with unnatural torque. Horus slammed a boot into his chest, sending him skidding across the ridge like a meteor, the earth exploding behind him. Kal hit the wall of an ancient Xenos shrine with enough force that cratered the structure. He lay half buried in the rubble, choking on the iron tang of his own blood. One eye was swollen shut, his bones were grinding, his cape in tatters. Horus advanced, no longer the lunar wolf of legend. Warp energy rippled from him like heat of molten metal. His blackened armor slithered with demonic glyphs, writhing in unseen dimensions. His eyes, once stars of noble fire, now twin vortexes of hate and promise. "This is mercy, Kal," Horus said, raising his talon. "You would have ruled them. You would have become what you feared." Kal coughed, and blood spilled from his lips. He pushed rubble off his chest and rose to one knee, trembling. "I would have protected them." For the briefest second, Horus hesitated. Then his face turned to stone. "Then die for them." The talon lunged forward. There was a wet, sickening crunch. Kal screamed as the corrupted claws punched through his side, piercing armor, skin, and sinew. Kryptonian blood, glowing and red, gushed over the stone. He sagged against the talon, his breath ragged, his head bowed. The wind died. Even the warp seemed to hold its breath. Horus leaned in, his voice low like gravel. You were the Emperor's favourite, his shining god. But he will discard you too, just as he will us. You're no saviour, Kal-El, just another broken tool in his hand. Kal's vision began to blur, the edges tinged with black. Yet the sound of distant war drums echoed in his skull. And now, Horus whispered, the true war begins. Then, a sound tore the sky apart, a scream of engines and the roar of vengeance. A thunderclap exploded across the heavens, and a spear of green fire descended from orbit. It was Vulcan's flagship, burning through the atmosphere like the wrath of a dying star. Moments later, the entire sky was torn apart. Drop pods, hundreds of them. Thunderhawks howled across the crimson clouds, their vox emitters screaming the arrival of salvation. The Salamanders had come. Bolters roared. Flamers howled. The corrupted lunar wolves turned, some hesitating, some snarling, before Horus's voice bellowed across the plateau like the voice of a demon. Destroy them all. The corrupted charged. The Salamanders met them in mid-run. Flames bloomed across the field like wildfire. The air became a forge of gunfire and screaming ceramite. But in the centre of it all, Kal-El still hung from Horus's talon, bleeding, barely conscious. You'll die knowing the truth, Horus growled, that this Imperium is not worth saving. But I will not only save it, I will rebuild it. Then, a green and gold meteor smashed into Horus like the thunder god. The ground shattered, the talon ripped free. Kal dropped, unconscious, hitting the stone with a dull thud. And above him stood a mountain of fury and fire. Vulcan, the Lord of the 18th Legion, his drake-scale cloak blazing in the wind. Fire danced across his obsidian warplate. In his hand, the dawn hammer gleamed with power from the heart of Nocturne's volcanoes. His voice rolled across the plateau. Get him out of here, he shouted to the nearest Salamander squad. Now, or we all die today. As medics raced forward, Vulcan turned his burning gaze back to Horus, who now stood, his armor cracked, warp energies coiling like snakes across his frame. You were our Warmaster, Vulcan said, his voice almost mournful. You were our brother. Now you're just a traitor, choking on his own pride. Horus's grin was a scar across his face. Then come, Fireborn. Let's see if flame can burn the void. And they clashed, Primarch against Primarch. The impact of their first blow flattened the land around them. Shockwaves exploded outward, sending both loyalist and traitor Astartes flying. The flame met the void. Justice met madness. Hope met despair. Behind them, gunships rose with Kal's broken body aboard. Blood dripped in his wake. The first casualty of a war that would rend the stars. And as the skies burned and the world screamed, the heresy had begun. The battlefield had become a storm of flame and madness. Vulcan's hammer crashed against Horus's talon, the clash sending ripples through the warp-tainted air. Each blow from the Dawnhammer rang like a forge god's wrath, but Horus, warped and empowered by chaos, did not yield. His form flickered with demonic shadows, and the ground beneath him withered to black ash with every step. The Salamanders fought desperately around them, their bolters blazing, their flamers roaring. The corrupted lunar wolves charged like possessed beasts, driven by hatred and warplust. The sky burned, a dome of hellfire and gunfire. But the duel at the heart of the storm was something more than war. It was myth made flesh. Vulkan slammed his hammer into Horus's side, cracking his armor, but Horus didn't falter. Instead, he drove his talon into Vulkan's abdomen, punching through the ceramite and drawing a roar of pain. "You can't win this," Horus growled. "Even you must see it." Vulkan gritted his teeth and spat blood. "I don't need to win. I only need to warn them." With a bloodied gauntlet, he triggered a voxlink. "All Salamanders," Vulkan said, his voice trembling with effort. "Pull back. Leave me. Get Kal-El out. Warn the Emperor. Tell him the storm is here." "My lord," came a shout over the vox. "We can still... That's an order. Get out. Now." The Salamanders faltered, then obeyed. Dropships began lifting off, Thunderhawks igniting their engines, withdrawing under barrage of traitor fire. Kal-El lay secured aboard Vulkan's flagship. His body was mangled, bathed in recovery light. His eyes opened weakly, and saw Vulkan, still fighting, still standing, until he wasn't. Horus struck the final blow, a downward cleave of his talon, powered by raw warp hatred. The Dawnhammer shattered, and Vulkan fell to one knee. Horus lifted him by the throat. "You were the strongest of us," he whispered. "And still, you were not enough." With a roar that split the heavens, Horus drove his claws through Vulkan's chest. Kal screamed, but his voice was lost in the void. The last thing he saw before the ship pulled away was Horus standing atop the ridge, bellowing in triumph as his lunar wolves howled in chorus. Many months later, Terra was burning. The siege of the Imperial palace raged like a dying god's fury. An apocalypse made manifest. Every bastion that had once stood proud upon the throne world now bled fire and ruin. The once pristine spires of the Imperium's might were crumbling, battered by the wrath of former suns turned monsters. The skies above were a boiling sea of blood-coloured clouds and war-rent storms. The screaming of the damned echoed from the torn veil between real space and the Imperium. Lightning lashed across the heavens, each bolt birthing shrieking demons that dove into the fray below. The air was a furnace of gunfire and ash. Titan clashed with Titan on the plains beyond the Eternity Wall, their seismic steps shaking continents. Reaver and Warlord engines gutted one another with plasma and graviton cannons, while knights duelled amidst the rubble, trampling whole companies beneath their armoured heels. The traitor legions had come in force. The Word-Eaters, frothing and red-handed, surged through the Saturnine Gate, turning corridors into meat grinders, drowning the stonework in gore. The Death Guard crawled across the eastern wall, bringing decay with them, pox engines vomiting filth that choked trenches and corrupted the ground itself. Sorcerers from the Thousand Suns unleashed sorcerous maelstroms from the air, ripping defenders apart with hexfire and transmutation storms. Even the air rebelled. The Imperial fists stood at the forefront, unyielding, their yellow armor dulled with blood and ash. Rogel Dawn, his blade in hand, orchestrated the defense with calculated fury, his face a sculpture of rage and resolve. Every inch was bought with oceans of blood. Above it all, like a sword of Damocles, loomed the Vengeful Spirit. Once the symbol of hope and unity, it now cast a deathly shadow upon Terra. Its hull was layered with sigils of the ruinous powers, a fortress for the greatest traitor to have ever lived. Inside the sanctum beneath the palace, the Emperor walked alone. His golden armor glowed in the candlelight, each step echoing with ancient power. He descended into the solar sanctum, a chamber wreathed in blinding energy. Ancient machines were feeding a cocoon of solar-infused glass and stasis fields. Within it, Kal-El waited. The Kryptonian floated slightly above the floor, encased in light. His body was a tapestry of battle. There were scars where Horus's talon had broken his skin, his once bright cape now gone. Around him shimmered his black and silver suit, forged by tech priests from adamantium-threaded polyweave, wrapped with solar absorption arrays and crystal matrices to store ambient stellar energy. His house crest remained over his chest, but it had changed. The iconic S was now more like a blade than a shield. Kal's eyes opened. They burned like twin suns. The Emperor approached. There was no need for words at first. The chamber pulsed with silence and gravity. But eventually, the Emperor spoke. "It is time." Kal's gaze never left him. "He killed Vulcan." "He will kill us all," the Emperor said, "unless we stop him." Kal floated down, his boots touching the ground with a whisper of restrained might. "I won't hold back this time," he said. The pain in his voice was carved in iron. The Emperor nodded. "Then let's end this. Together." He raised his gauntleted hand. Reality trembled. Golden warp light burst from the air, forming a spiraling gateway of light and power. The air hummed with untamed energy, the portal to the eye of the storm. Kal clenched his fists, absorbing the last ambient solar radiation, his armor glowing faintly with the captured light. Together, they stepped through. The Vengeful Spirit was no longer just a vessel. It was a living cathedral of madness. The hallways pulsed with veins of molten brass and flesh. Demonic faces screamed silently from the walls. The very air was thick with incense and warp gas, choking and electric. Thunder echoed through the decks, and the chanting of chaos-worshipping priests reverberated like a funeral dirge. At the command die, beneath a throne of fused bone, blackened ceramite, and warp-wrought iron, stood Horus. His form had grown since Davin. No longer merely a Primarch. He was something far worse. Something different entirely. The warp coiled around him like a lover, empowering yet devouring. His armor was now a living thing, crawling with runes, whispering in tongues long since dead. His eyes were bottomless maelstroms of hunger and vision. He gazed through the viewing port at Terra, at the palace breaking beneath the fists of his armies. Soon, he murmured. Very soon. Then he felt it. A pulse. A shiver in the warp. He turned. Two beams of blinding light split reality open in the center of the bridge. One was gold, the other black. The light faded, and from it stepped the Emperor of mankind. And to his side was Kal-El of Krypton. The bridge fell silent. No demon stirred. No priest chanted. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath. But Horus simply smiled. So, he said, his voice echoing like thunder. You've come. The Emperor said nothing. Kal stepped forward, his cape trailing. His muscles were humming with their latent power. This ends today, Kal said, his voice low, yet filled with wrath. Horus descended from his throne, the talon of Horus crackling with warp lightning. The blade of mournful fire danced on his back. He walked slowly, savoring the moment. It does, he said. The lights flickered. The gods watched, and the final war began. The bridge of the Vengeful Spirit burned with hellfire. The air trembled with power as Horus descended from his grotesque throne, his eyes glowing with warp flame. Around him, demonic runes shimmered like heat on metal, and the talon of Horus crackled with dark hunger. He stalked toward the intruders, the Emperor of mankind and Kal-El of Krypton. Kal stood motionless, his black cape flowing behind him, the House of El sigil on his chest, now a silver blade of judgment. His gaze was fixed on Horus, not with pity nor with sorrow, but pure fury. Last chance, Horus, Kal said, his voice quiet and deadly. Stand down. Horus bared his teeth in a feral grin. You always were the naive one. Then he struck, the talon of Horus slashing forward, warp lightning crackling from its claws. The air screamed as reality twisted. Kal blurred, sidestepping the blow with speed beyond comprehension, and countered with a thunderous uppercut that shattered the deck beneath Horus's boots. The Warmaster flew backwards, smashing through pillars of brass and bone. He rose, growling, but Kal advanced slowly. No longer the measured guardian. Now he was judgment incarnate. You killed Vulcan. You betrayed your brothers. You threaten every life in the Imperium. Horus unleashed a wave of psychic fire. Kal roared in pain as the warp energy lashed into him, burning through his mind like acid. He dropped to one knee. The Emperor stepped forward, golden light blazing from his hands. With a sweep of his arm, he banished the warp flames, shielding Kal with his own power. He is not yours to break, the Emperor said. The battle exploded. Kal launched forward with renewed fury, his fists like meteors. Horus blocked, parried, countered with demonic speed. But the Kryptonian was faster, stronger. Each blow from Kal drove Horus back, sent cracks racing through the walls. It brought the mighty ship to the brink of destruction. The Emperor joined the attack, wielding his psychic might with surgical precision. Spears of golden light impaled Horus's limbs, bending his armor inward, warping the energy of the gods against him. Horus howled in pain. He struck Kal with a blast of concentrated warp chaos, sending the Kryptonian crashing through 3 bulkheads. Blood splattered the walls. Kal gasped, eyes flickering, pain crackling through his veins. The Emperor pressed forward. Horus caught his wrist, and for a moment, the 2 greatest beings of mankind were locked in a death struggle. Warp and divinity, father and son, the light against the dark. Then Kal returned. He flew like a spear, smashing into Horus with such force the bridge collapsed beneath them. They fell into the catacombs of the ship, surrounded by the twisted bones of lunar wolves and the shrieking of half-born demons. Kal stood over Horus. His face was bloodied, his eyes burning. This is for Vulcan. He struck, blow after blow. They were steel-snapping punches, bone-shattering impacts. Horus fought back, claws slashing, psychic storms writhing. But he was getting slower. His power was diminishing. The Emperor raised his hand. A beam of golden light lanced into Horus's chest. Kal struck one final time. The blow cracked his talon. It shattered the breastplate. It drove Horus to his knees. The Emperor stepped forward. Together, father and adopted son raised their hands. One divine, one forged of alien sunfire. For the Imperium, the Emperor said. Kal nodded. For the ones we lost. The combined blast tore Horus asunder. Warp energies shrieked, demons howled, and the Warmaster of Chaos was annihilated in a storm of light and fury. Silence fell. The Vengeful Spirit shuddered. The Emperor turned to Kal. End it. All of it. Kal-El nodded, then vanished. The skies over Terra split apart with thunder not born of storms. A black streak cut through the heavens, faster than thought, brighter than any comet. Sound came only in its wake, a howl of ruptured air, of space breaking before raw force. Kal-El had returned. Aboard the shattered remnants of the Vengeful Spirit, the traitor legions felt it first, a pressure in the warp, a presence that was not demonic, not psychic, but something ancient, something righteous and furious. Across the ash-choked battlefields of the throne world, corrupted Astartes, once sons of the Emperor, paused in confusion. Then came the sonic boom. Kal struck the earth like the hammer of a god, landing amid a division of Death Guard with such force that the surrounding buildings simply disintegrated. A white-hot shockwave rippled outward, vaporizing filth and corruption alike. His fists, glowing with solar heat, moved like lightning given form. A punch turned a blight drone into mist. Another shattered the skull of a demon prince mid-incantation. A sweep of his heat vision tore a trench of fire through a dozen corrupted tanks. He roared, a sound that echoed across the continents. The Death Guard stood no chance. Their bloated forms, shielded by contagion and rot, boiled in their armor. Kal ripped through plague towers with his bare hands, molten slag trailing from his gauntlets. Next came the Word Eaters. They charged, screaming praises to Khorne, their chain blades revving, their faces lost to rage. But Kal didn't stop. He met them head on, his fists a blur, his boots cracking stone, his eyes burning with wrath. He caught a charging berserker mid-swing and crushed his skull with a backhand. Another he threw skyward. He threw him so hard he simply left the atmosphere into the dark void of space. Blood was spilled, bones were shattered, and yet he moved faster than even Space Marines could track. 1 second here, next, gone, reappearing in the middle of a traitor regiment and unleashing a whirlwind of devastation. His strikes shattered the ground. His heat vision carved glowing trenches across the battlefield. The 1,000 suns tried to conjure vortexes, hurling warp fire and illusions at him. But Kal walked right through them. Their magic lashed his mind. Their psychic screams clawed at his soul. But still he came. Slower, perhaps, blood leaking from his ears. But he endured, and when he reached them, there was no spell strong enough to stop what came next. He broke them, burned them, crushed them. All across Terra, the traitor legions faltered. Some dropped to their knees begging for mercy. Kal gave none. He remembered Vulcan. He remembered the screams. No mercy, no hesitation. He tore the wings from demons and the limbs from corrupted dreadnoughts. He threw a knight into the warp gate it had spawned from, sealing it behind a collapsed mountain. Titans fell in the distance, and Kal raced through their legs, striking reactor cores and detonating them in nuclear fury. The sky blazed with red, and then silence. What remained of the enemy forces had scattered. Those who tried to flee never made it. Kal moved faster than their engines, appearing inside their ships before they even launched, ripping out their cores, watching them collapse. At last, Terra grew still. Smoke drifted from the ruined landscape. Demon shrieks faded into the void, and Kal, bloodied, scorched, and unbroken, returned to the plaza of the Eternity Gate. The massive golden doors stood open. Rogel Dawn and the Imperial fists watched from the ramparts. Their helmets were removed. Their eyes were wide with awe. Behind them, crowds of survivors, civilians, soldiers, priests. They all fell to their knees in reverent silence. Kal knelt before the Emperor. His armor was scorched, his cape in tatters. Blood trickled from the corners of his mouth, but his head was high, his breathing was steady. "It is done," he said. The Emperor descended the stairs slowly, his golden armor glowing like a dying star. He reached out, placing a hand on Kal's shoulder. "Rise, Kal-El. You have served not just me, but all of humanity. You are its sword now, its fire, its hope." Kal bowed his head. "I am yours, always." The Emperor smiled, and for the first time in decades, the sun rose over Terra, golden and unshrouded, piercing the darkness with promise. Weeks passed. The fires of war were smothered. The skies of Terra were cleared. The people rejoiced. Massive statues were erected across the continents. Kal-El standing with one fist raised, his cape flaring. His face was stern yet noble. His name was spoken in the same breath as sanguineous, Vulcan, and the Emperor himself. Cathedrals rang with chants of the Avenger of mankind, but beneath the surface, far below the rebuilt towers and sanctified shrines, the true work had begun. In a hidden laboratory deeper than even the black vaults, beneath a labyrinth of gene-coded doors and null fields, the Emperor walked alone. The air in this chamber was sterile, silent. Golden light pulsed from ancient machines. Warp dampeners thrummed in hidden corners, and in the center of it all, inside a stasis capsule of gold and obsidian, floated a vial of deep crimson. Kryptonian blood, still warm. The Emperor stood before it, his eyes aglow with something ancient and calculating. So much potential, he murmured. He turned to a console. Ancient cogitators flickered to life. Techno-arcane symbols shimmered in the air. Cloning chambers hissed in the darkness. A gene sequencer unfolded like a blooming mechanical flower, bathing the room in sterile light. Around him, servo skulls began assembling surgical tools. Silos opened, revealing chimera gene seeds. Vat-grown organs floated in suspended gel. Data scrolls filled the air with alien equations. The Emperor didn't flinch. His voice echoed into the chamber, addressed to no one and everyone. I have seen the limits of men, and I have seen what lies beyond. Kryptonian flesh, Kryptonian will. There is no weapon more perfect. He raised his hand. Another pod hissed open beside the stasis vial. A second form, featureless, embryonic, floated within. Not fully grown, not yet conscious, but soon, very soon,